We all know by now that a mix of cardio and lifting weights is good for us. But we are forgetting about something that is crucially as important: flexibility, especially as you age. However, there is a common misbelief that if you are not flexible by the age of 20, you are unable to become flexible later in life. But that is not exactly true, and I am living proof to that. So in this video, I am going to share evidence-based strategies to drastically improve your flexibility and surprising things that are not in the science, but that really worked for me. Because I was not able to do the splits until I was past the age of 20. And now in my 30s, I can still do them. And if we haven't met before, I'm Marie and I'm a registered dietitian. And the first point that I want to make is that there is no food that is going to make you more flexible. That's not my secret, and it is not that easy. But I'll leave timestamps for everything that we're going to cover down below. Now let's get into the video. First, let me explain why flexibility is so important. And no, we are not talking about the obvious that it can help reduce stiffness or that it's just a pretty cool party trick if you can put your legs behind your head. But kudos to you if you can do that. Simply put, people with higher flexibility scores live longer and have a lower risk of dying. And if we think it through, flexibility is so important, especially as you get older, because it can help prevent life-changing falls that can completely threaten your independence in later life. If you think about it logically, if you are stiff and if you trip or fall, it is going to be so much harder to reach your hand out to grab something to catch onto or to stabilize yourself. And if you're a woman watching this, although it can happen to men too, we are at a much higher risk of osteoporosis, which is weak and fragile bones as we get older. And if you fall and you end up with something like a hip fracture as an older adult, the mortality rates for something like this are really scary. They're 30% after 1 year. And what this means is that 30% of older adults die within 1 year of having a hip fracture. Plus, something that is definitely not emphasized enough, but a strong muscle is in fact a flexible muscle. It is no good having a big, bulky bicep if it can't bend, stretch, and move with you. So a flexible muscle is not by any means weak. It's actually really strong. So I have very good news. You do not need to be stretching for 30 to 60 minutes a day to see results. In fact, it is actually a lot less. And I'm pulling this information from a very large study looking at almost 7,000 stretching adults that was just published in the International Journal of Sports Medicine at the end of 2024. Great timing for me making this video. But their recommendations were that if you are looking to get more flexible in the long term, the number to aim for is 10 minutes of stretching per muscle group per week. So for example, if you are trying to gain flexibility in your lower back, over the course of the week, you want to aim for 10 minutes of total stretching in this area. If you go over this to 11, 12, or even 30 minutes stretching your lower back, there doesn't seem to be any further benefit. So 10 minutes is the sweet spot. Now, it's also best to divide this up during the week. Don't just stretch for 10 minutes on Sunday, then do nothing all week and stretch for another 10 minutes next Sunday. So ideally, what you would do is maybe 2 minutes 5 times a week to get to that 10-minute mark. And remember again, this is per muscle. So if you're trying to stretch your lower back and maybe doing a shoulder stretch, you would be doing 20 minutes in total. 10 minutes of stretching on each muscle. And also, stretching for over 4 minutes at a time tends to max out the benefits. So you don't really need to stretch one muscle for longer than 4 minutes. So the takeaway here is the muscle group that you are trying to target and get more flexible in, you want to stretch it in total for about 10 minutes every week. And this is best done in sessions that are shorter than 4 minutes, spread out over several days. So little and often, short and sweet. I'm going to pause here and ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, I would really appreciate it if you hit that red subscribe button below. And if you're looking for healthy, high protein recipe ideas, I'd recommend following me over on Instagram. Now, it's also best to generally not static stretch a cold muscle, as this can increase your risk of injury. I would stretch after a warm-up or after your exercise session. Your muscles are also going to be more elastic at this point, and this will make the stretching feel a little bit easier, and you will get more out of the stretch. Now, you might be getting confused at this point. What is a static stretch? So let's just recap on this because there are two main types of stretching. A static stretch is one in which you lie, stand, or sit still, and you hold a single position for a period of time. And these are the ones we want to do once we're warmed up or at the end of a session. But as part of a warm-up and before engaging in exercise, it's generally a good idea to do some dynamic stretches. And dynamic stretches are controlled movements. And these help prepare your muscles, your ligaments, and your joints for the exercise that you are about to do. So for example, doing some butt kicks is an example of a dynamic stretch, or doing something like shoulder rotations. Whereas holding a quad stretch is a static stretch. So dynamic stretches before and static or still after you are warm. Now, stretching should not be painful. If anything is painful, you're not going to stick with it. Just like going on a painfully strict diet, you will only end up binge eating. You want to stretch to a point where there is tension and it is somewhat uncomfortable, but you should still be able to breathe through it. And really intense stretching can actually be unhelpful because it can induce what we call a stretch reflex. If you're stretching really intensely, your body wants to contract the muscles to bring them back to their normal length. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that your stretching is more effective the harder that you do it. And this recent study found that both hard stretching and gentle stretching were equally effective. And flexibility trainers will often say that gentle stretching is your best bet. Being gentle helps you stretch a little bit longer and more often, and it will help you enjoy the process much more. And these are really important factors if it's something that we want to build into a consistent habit. We don't want to absolutely hate it or we'll never end up doing it. Now, I've had a lot of people ask about how I became flexible. So a little backstory on me. I was always a very athletic child and teenager. In fact, I have 3 All-Ireland medals playing for Cork ladies, which is a big claim to fame if you're Irish. Comment below if you understand. But during all of this time, I was never actually very flexible. Now, I wasn't stiff, but I was never able to do something like the splits. And then during college, I started doing a lot of running. I was doing 10Ks and half marathons. And again, although I was always active and I would do some stretching afterwards, I was never really a very flexible person. However, then something changed. I started going to the gym. Now, this might not seem revelationary, but there was a big common denominator between the football and the running. What I was mainly doing all of these years was mainly exercise that involved around running. If you run a half marathon, you're in the same position most of the time. Similarly, if you're playing football, you're in that running position. Yes, you're reaching for the ball or kicking the ball a little bit more, but you're still mainly doing a lot of running around the pitch. But then when I got into the gym, I was lifting weights. I was doing squats, I was doing lunges, and my muscles started to get stronger. And I had never really strength trained before, at least not properly. And remember what I said at the start of this video. A strong muscle is a flexible muscle. A strong muscle should be able to bend with you. So then I started to put some intention behind it. And what I noticed to be extremely helpful for me was that when I'm doing my strength training, so when I am doing lunges, for example, I would always try to do so in a very slow and controlled manner. And I would really allow myself to feel the stretch in the muscle during the movement. And if I was doing something like squats, I would make sure that I was getting in that deep squat and going through a full range of motion. And I like to do that with all of my exercises. And I think when you can, using weights here helps because you can get in a deeper stretch, as long as you're doing so safely. But I also started to just really enjoy the feeling of doing this. When I'm in the gym and I'm moving my body and I'm feeling my muscles, I feel really connected to my body and it feels great and it makes me want to keep doing it. And that's how I really started to fall in love with exercise. I also won a holiday once for doing the splits in front of a car, which was another big bonus for my flexibility. But even yesterday, for example, when I was in the gym, I was using the hip abductor machine and I would just hold at the outside position and I could hold that for 10 seconds at a time and then go back in. Push back out, hold, and I would really feel the stretch. And you're also putting the muscle under tension for a longer period of time. But once I started to realize that my muscles were starting to get stronger and more flexible and bending with me, I then did start stretching with more intention behind it. So at the end of my workout, I was always go to the side and do some stretching, but it was never anything very long. It was definitely never over 10 minutes, just like how the literature suggests, because I would usually be in a rush to get out of the gym to get to work. But interestingly, what I have found is that for most of 2024 just gone, I didn't have a gym membership for most of the year. So I hadn't been going to the gym and instead I was doing a lot more running again. And I found that I became really stiff again. Now I'm back in the gym again, and I'm doing more weights, and I'm doing more different motions and different exercises. And I can feel my flexibility improving, and I can do the splits again. But I had to gradually get myself back into it. Now remember, a truly good stretch is not just about going through the motions. It's about truly increasing your range of motion and function in your body. So for the example here, I'm going to go to the extreme and I'm going to choose improving the range of motion for the splits. Now, even if that is not an aim for you, if that seems absolutely impossible, don't let that turn you off. You can still use these stretches because they are excellent lower body stretches, which are really important for lower body strength and stability. So grab yourself a pillow or a yoga mat and try to follow along. So step 1, you want to try and target the muscle involved in the area where you want more flexibility. So for the splits, there are 2 main muscle groups involved. The hip flexors of the legs going backwards, and then the hamstrings of the legs going forward. There are lots of different stretches that you can use for these muscle groups, but I just picked one for each. You don't need to complicate it any further. So to nail the hip flexor stretch, you want to start in a kneeling position with both legs at a 90-degree angle. You can use a cushion to support your knee and move one leg out in front of you. You want to press your front heel into the floor and tuck the toes of your back foot under. Tuck your pelvis and squeeze in your rear glutes and lean forward. And you should feel that stretch at the front of your hips. Those are your hip flexors. The hamstrings are being stretched on the leg going forward in the splits. So you want to start on one knee with the other leg straight out in front of you, with your toes pointed forward towards the ceiling. You want to keep the back flat or arched as you push your hips back and hinge your chest forward. You want to think of it like lengthening forward versus rounding down. Imagine a string pulling your chest toward the wall in front of you. And you really want to make sure that you are sticking your butt out and behind you so that you really feel that stretch in the back of your leg, not in your glutes and not in your lower back, but really in your hamstrings. And again, make sure that you do this on both sides. So I will generally do this for around 30 to 45 seconds on each side, and I'll do it twice. So after I've spent my time on both of these exercises, the next step is to get into the splits. Now you don't have to do this. In fact, I would only recommend doing this if trying to get into the splits is a goal for you. But getting into the splits position is in itself a stretch. You're just managing to stretch both muscles at the same time. And it's really important that you do this after you have done the individual stretches. And it's okay that you're not going to be able to do it straight away. But the more often you do it, the closer and closer you will start to get. And you want to do this routine about 3 to 5 times a week to allow you to get to that 10-minute mark for each muscle group. And remember, do not force it. Pain does not equal progress. Listen to your body and take it slow, because you can injure yourself when stretching. It's also really helpful to focus on your breath when you're doing any type of stretches. This will allow your muscles to relax into the stretch. And consistency really is key here. It's better to stretch a little bit every day than it is to do a big session 1 or 2 times a week. So to wrap up everything that we have learned, flexibility is extremely important, especially as we get older. So according to science, to increase flexibility, take the muscle that you are trying to target. Stretch it in total for about 10 minutes a week. And this is best done little and often, in sessions that are shorter than 4 minutes, spread out over several days. Now let me know in the comments if you have any flexibility goals, or if you would like me to share more of my favorite flexibility stretches, because my next goal is nailing the box splits. And remember that it is never too late to become more flexible. Start small, stay consistent, and enjoy the process. If you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you will like this one next. As always, thank you very much for watching. Stay happy and healthy, and I will see you again next week. Thanks for watching.